right, to all my Fast and Furious fans, the final ride on this journey with these characters we've been following since 2001 is beginning to take its last few trips on this journey of the Fast and Furious franchise, y'all. What's going on? Elliot here from MovieFiles, and as you can see above me and below me here, we are talking spoilers for the 10th movie in the Fast and Furious franchise. You can go ahead and add 11 because Hobbs and Shaw is a spinoff, but as far as the main franchise, is the 10th movie, y'all. It started back in 2001, and here we are in 2023 talking about the 10th film. And man, your boy was a fan, and we'll be breaking it down in today's spoiler review. And I'm so excited to be here with you all. As far as what we're going to be discussing, we will be talking about the plot of the film, breaking down all the major moments, favorite moments, maybe moments that didn't necessarily work for me. We'll be talking about the ending. We'll be talking about that post-credit scene, and also I'll be sharing with you all my thoughts on what next for the franchise. Hobbs and Shaw 2, Fast and Furious 11, possibly 12, and so on and so forth. So this will be a fun time. I love doing these. This is just me today. I've done various different spoiler discussions, whether it's me and a group of other great content creators, live streams, solo outings like we're doing today. I just love interacting with you all and breaking down films and talking films with you today. And I'm very excited to be talking about this film because I do have a spoiler-free review on the movie. So if you want to get my more kind of in-depth analytical review of the film, the pros and the cons of it all, you can check out that video, of course, if you haven't seen the film yet. But if you've seen Fast 10 or you don't really care about spoilers, that's what we're discussing today. All things Fast 10 and beyond in today's spoiler review. But before we get into the fun stuff, do your boy a favor. If you yourself are a Fast and Furious fan, if you enjoyed this film, if you're enjoying the conversation today, consider hitting the like button on today's video, as well as sharing the video, and also consider subscribing to the channel. Like I said, I do other spoiler reviews for various different types of movies. In the last month or so, we did a spoiler discussion for Guardians 3, Beau is Afraid, Evil Dead Rise, and there are so many others. So I'm going to leave actually my spoiler discussion playlist in the description of this video, but I love doing these. So excited to be here with you all. And again, if you can like, share, and comment, and consider subscribing, I would really appreciate it. So let's get into this, man. I think the first thing I want to kind of start off with is just kind of, and I talked about it in my spoiler-free review, me as a fan of this franchise, and you see I'm rocking my Fast 10 shirt that I got at my early screening, but I'm a fan, man. I didn't initially, of course, this came out in 2001. I had seen the first one like many years later when I was in high school and thought it was fun, right? You know, a 90s kid, and I know Point Break, you know, that was a film I grew up on, great movie, and you can definitely see the inspiration from that film, Point Break, into the first Fast and Furious. And then throughout the next 3 to 4, I'm talking Too Fast, Too Furious, Tokyo Drift. And once we kind of hit that point, that Too Fast, Too Furious, Tokyo Drift, those are two films that came out at a time that I was like, oh, these are just fun films. Sure, you know, it is what it is, but I wasn't like locked into the franchise. It wasn't until Fast and Furious that I said, okay, hold on. We're getting a little bit more serious. It's more about this, not necessarily about the street racing and the hot girls and all. Yeah, there's elements of that in the fourth one. We're now switching the tone, and it's getting a little bit more, again, the action is feeling heightened. The, you know, abilities of the cars are getting a little bit more ridiculous, to say the least. But I like the shift in the tone that they were kind of going at with a Fast and Furious. And then we get to, I don't want to spoil anything because I'm going to have a ranking of all 10 plus 11 films in the franchise. But let's just say Fast 5, and as you all can probably see behind me here, I got 6 and 7. These are the 3 that I personally own. I have the other ones like on digital and DVD, but these are the ones I hold near and dear to my heart. Fast 5, 6, and 7. That to me is the perfect trilogy of films within this franchise. Those are, again, I'm going to have a separate video ranking the films, but those are the ones that I really enjoy, especially 5. And it was just, it switched the whole idea of the franchise. It got more ridiculous, which we'll talk about here in a second, but they've also heightened the level of the action in the heist elements, in the spy espionage elements. And it kind of really, there's the rare franchises that do that, you know, 4 or 5 films in that kind of switched the tone of what you originally got with people stealing DVD players and racing in the streets of LA. It switched on the head. And I know for some people it was a turnoff, but for me, it got me re-engaged with the franchise. Now, as we'll talk about with 8 and 9, it kind of pulled me back a little bit. But again, 5, 6, and 7 to me was a perfect set of films that really, when I think of the Fast and Furious, yes, I think of the OGs and what it started off as. But what I like from this franchise is the action and the chase sequences and the hand-to-hand combats. And the stories have gotten a little too overcomplicated, but I like the idea that they're trying to do something that's like, hey, Mission Impossible, John Wick, meets James Bond. So I kind of like that spin when handled properly. And I think, again, 5, 6, and 7 really kind of embrace those elements that I enjoyed. And if I'm being honest with you all, I personally think they should have ended the franchise at Fast 7 for multiple reasons. Two of them that come to mind is, number one, it ended the story pretty well. At that point in the franchise, the characters have been on the run. And then the Brian character of it all and Paul Walker of it all, who from the beginning, I've always felt like he was the lead of these films. It was always, to me, Brian's story. And obviously, we know the tragic passing of Paul Walker and how it played so beautifully in that 7th film with them going on the road, and that moment almost gets to me. But that's when I think it should have ended. But of course, money talks. And of course, Vin Diesel. This is a franchise that, Reddick has been kind of hit or miss. The Triple X franchise has been kind of hit or miss. He made that Witcher movie, whatever it was called. And of course, the Guardians, but it's mostly, the voice acting, which I'm not underplaying voice acting. He's great at Groot, but it's not, a prominent face on camera type of role for him. This is his baby. This is his franchise that once it's all said and done and Vin Diesel retires, until that day happens, this is his franchise. And he's, for lack of better words, he's squeezing as much as he possibly can with this franchise. So I get all that. But then it brings me into 8 and 9 of it all. Now, prior to seeing Fast 10, I revisited 5, 6, and 7, and it got me hyped because if I'm being honest with you all, as I'll talk about in a second, I wasn't a fan of 9, so I was kind of apprehensive. I was kind of just on the fence about 10. I was going to see it, but I wasn't like excited for it. But rewatching 5, 6, and 7 got me hyped. 8 is fine. Dom Toretto turns on them, but we find out why with, little B being kidnapped and everything that's going on with Cypher. 9 was just such a bad movie on so many levels. It just was too ridiculous, and we'll talk about how I do appreciate the ridiculousness of this franchise, but it was just too ridiculous. Them going to space, the Jacob Toretto mystery brother. I like John Cena. I'm going to talk about him here in today's spoiler review, but that whole reveal was just not for me. I did not like that character at all. Just a film that just left a bad taste in my mouth. But that leads us into the present day. That leads us into talking about today's film, and that is the 10th movie. And again, leading up to it, I like the casting choices. I'm a fan of Jason Momoa. I like Brie Larson. I'm becoming a big fan of Alan Ritchson, who plays Ames in this film. And of course, I love the entire cast coming together. So I'm like, okay, 9's kind of getting out of my mouth, that nasty, bitter taste. I pulled like a Letty, right? I had like selective memory where I'm like trying to forget everything about 9 going to this 10th one. And of course, when we saw the trailer, it got me hyped. And here we are talking about it. Let's get into my thoughts of the film and break it all down, starting off with the opening sequence. We cut back to one of my favorite films of the franchise, and that is Fast 5, where we see from the perspective of the villain Reyes, his point of view of before he got robbed by the crew, him talking to his son, who is revealed to be the best villain in his franchise, Jason Momoa as Dante Reyes. But the thing I want to focus on in this scene, it's a central theme of this particular story: legacy. I know we poke fun and poke holes at the plot and really not having the best plot and narrative or character development, but there are things that are a through line in this particular film, and this is one of those examples of legacy being a prominent element of this film, because he's talking to his son about, of course he was corrupt and he was a bad guy. In the day, it's his dad, it's his blood, it's his family, right? So we see him talking about this is all the years, the hard work built to this, and this is my legacy to hand to you, son. Of course, we know how it plays out, which I will say right off the bat, pretty good job by the post-production of it all, repurposing some of the footage from Fast 5. You can clearly see that they also shot new scenes with that actor, the father of who played Mr. Reyes. They brought the actor back, but then they did a good job of cutting in and out of used footage and new footage. I thought that was really well handled. And of course, in the Fast and Furious narrative of going back to a previous film and injecting a new plot to, tie into the new story, they have Jason Momoa as Dante. If you've seen Fast 5, and of course you've seen this film, they make it seem the guy that was shooting at Dom Toretto, of course, it was Dante in the car, which I revisited Fast Five. You can go back and watch that scene. Obviously, we know Jason Momoa was in the car. You can see a little bit. This is what I want to give them credit for. Even going back to some of these older films where they kind of rework the scene to add in a character, they do a pretty good job because you never see the person's face in the actual car. Now you see the guy that's driving it in Fast Five. He's wearing like a blue jacket. So I thought that they should have maybe did a little bit of better job of making sure that he wore the same thing. But that's just a little nitpick. But neither here nor there. We see him get thrown off the bridge as he starts his journey of vengeance. He wakes up and it was almost like he was reborn, like he almost died having this purpose to kill Dom's family. So that was a good flashback and a recap of the sorts and kind of reworking that Fast Five scene. But that was probably the only one I really enjoyed. The rest, there's a couple other moments in this film, and they do a flashback, when they do a recap, and it didn't take me out of the movie, but I was just like, come on, guys. We're 10 movies into this franchise. If people in the audience are lost or don't know what that scene might have meant, I thought there was enough subtext to kind of understand, oh, this is someone that means someone. I just wanted to go back to that was a good purpose of a recap or flashback because it gave us something that actually ties into this story versus giving us like a previously on the Fast and Furious film. But as I digress, as we move forward, we're now into the present day. See the scene, we're again paralleling this theme of legacy and fathers and sons. We see a father and son have an interaction, and that is Dom and Little B. And you think, oh, this is just Dom maybe showing his son the ropes, but no, it's Little B in the car, and I'm calling it now. Didn't get to see Little B driving. Well, we see it in the scene, but we didn't see him driving the car in the rest of the movie. Put my money on it. We'll be behind the wheel before this franchise is said and done. I would imagine in the next one, he's going to have a moment saving his dad or saving Letty or saving someone important. He's going to get in the car, and it's going to be a very like son, father passing the baton, passing the torch on to his son. So Little B will be behind the scene and probably have a cool ass driving sequence come Fast 11, Fast 12. It's not only setting that up, but it is setting up the idea of the central theme of this movie, which is listening, right? Damo, he says it like 3 or 4 times in this film, like no one listens these days, right? Talking about this generation, you know, there are a lot of times where we're doing a lot of talking, but we're not doing a lot of listening. Also, in regards to listening, he's, you know, instilling the good morals of being a Toretto and learning the streets. And he's instilling these important lessons to his son, a la what we saw with the opening sequence with the Reyes family. So again, I know we make fun of the plot, but there are some themes to kind of gravitate towards and kind of grab onto, that being one of them there. But we cut over to the good old traditional family barbecue. It's normally at the end of the movie, but this time it's at the beginning because we'll get to the end of the movie once we get there. But they hear that their grandmother is coming by, the grandmother of Dom, Mia, and of course Jacob. They're there to celebrate. Meanwhile, we hear that there's a side mission that's going to take place led by Roman, who's going to go to Rome. And, you know, Rome. I will say now before I forget later on this breakdown, I thought Tyrese was hilarious in this film. He's been funny in previous films. I did not think he was funny in 9. The whole like him dying, but then not dying, that got old really quick. But I found him to be very funny in this movie. The whole him being a cheapskate, him having the money on him, I really got a kick out of Roman in this film. The whole leadership of it all, which might be foreshadowing. We'll see what happens to Dom Toretto come the next one. They might need a new leader, you know, how things wrap up. But I have a side mission. So again, there's a conversation between Dom and his grandmother. They definitely planted the seeds of the ultimate sacrifice that Dom's going to have to make about protecting his family, whether it's the next one or if you saw Vin Diesel on the red carpet of the premiere of this film that they want to make one more. They're going to make, you know, 11 and 12. We'll see what the box office says, but it will ultimately come down to Dominic Toretto will die for his family. He will put his life on the line, sacrifice himself. That's something that I think that they've been setting up for a while, but definitely more so in this one than anything. And we pivot over to later in the night. And, you know, I will point this out. Why in the hell is Dom, Letty, and Little B living in their old house from the original, right? Of course, we know that Brian and Mia and their kids were living there, but what after that Decker Shaw sent them that bomb and the house was exploded, they're like, we got to get the hell out of Dodge. We got to keep our family safe. And all of a sudden, Dom and Letty are living there. It's like, what happened to the farmhouse? That's the most safe place you guys can be, because in my eyes, enemies know where you live. Point in case, Cypher comes just, you know, she's injured. She knocks on the door and says, I found the devil. So I'm like, again, I'm just thinking to myself, why do you guys, again, I can understand the idea, the sentiment of Dom Toretto. This is our home. This is our family. This is where we're from. We're not going to run. These streets protect us. You know, if someone comes knocking on our door, we're going to answer with our own force. But at the same time, you got to be smart when you have a kid upstairs. But putting that aside, Cypher enters the room. She's all beaten up and bloody, talking about there's someone that she thought she was the devil, but no, she met the devil tonight, and that is in the form of Dante. I'm gonna get to it. Jason Momoa was fantastic in this film. Like, he was the best character. Every time this man was on screen, he ate it up. Cut to what happened to her. We see that he came in her home, very similar to what she's doing with Dom, but of course he's not beaten up and battered. He comes in and he's solo dolo. That shows you the type of villain he is, that he knew he had control of the situation based on the information he has on her men. Obviously, Cypher's feeling good about herself. She got her protection. She got her people. She's like, dude, do you know where you are right now? I can take you out with a snap of a finger. But he's like, no, I'm not really concerned about you because I got your men. And it reveals that he knows everyone in the room, their family. He kills the one guy that doesn't even have a cat, but he has all their family members hostage, persuade them, like, if you want your family to live, come work for me. Meanwhile, take out your old boss. And we cut to the next morning, and this is where little Mr. Nobody, which it's going to be revealed that Scott Eastwood is the son of Kurt Russell as we meet his daughter later in the film. I know they haven't revealed that yet, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a reveal coming down the road. The rest of the crew, they're already left from Rome and they're about to do their thing, but Dom finds out from Mr. Nobody, little Mr. Nobody, that no, we didn't assign him to that mission. That's someone else. And this is where Dom and Letty have to give them the warning that they're being set up by Dante. So now we're cutting to what I consider to be one of the better action sequences in this franchise. And to that note, I'll break down a scene here, but I want to put a little pin in this conversation because it's something I want to bring up. I know the Fast and Furious franchise, for some people, love it to death. This is like their number one franchise over Star Wars, Marvel, DC, you name it. And I love that people have a franchise that they love. Then there's the other people that hate on the franchise, rightfully so, poke fun of some of the illogical things that happen. But I just want to take a moment to appreciate the action that we get in this franchise. I think as a critic, an audience, a fan of action, I think we've become somewhat accustomed or maybe spoiled or really undervalue what this particular franchise has brought to the action genre. Because again, I don't want to say oversaturated, but we're spoiled by the riches. We have the Marvel, DC, comic book movies in general that has their own genre within the action genre that's been doing a great job. Of course, we have people like John Wick, Mission Impossible franchise. I mentioned Charlize earlier, Mad Max Fury Road, The Raid. I mean, there are so many people talk about we don't get action movies. Like, there are action movies all the time that are incredible. This franchise is kind of, maybe some audience members don't come to appreciate the stunt work that go into these sequences. Like, they're driving car, and of course there's visual effects and they add in, there is a lot of practicality going on with someone behind the wheel doing a stunt, putting their life on the line to entertain us, right? I know we all applaud, again, John Wick, Keanu Reeves does most of his stunts. We applaud Tom Cruise doing most of his stunts. I know Michelle Rodriguez does her stunts, Charlize Theron to a certain extent. Like, they're megastars, they can't do too much because they have insurance, but applaud all those franchises. But we don't appreciate what they're doing behind the wheel. And this is show and case in this Rome sequence. It's one of my favorite sequences, action sequences in this entire franchise. This Rome sequence to me was fire, literally fire. I mean, the whole setup is Dante at this point has had the ability to take out some of Cypher's technology, some technology she used in Fast 8 when she was able to override the systems and override the cars and the submarine, which that submarine makes an appearance later in the film. Dante ultimately uses that same technology to override the mission that our crew is on. At this point, Letty and Dom and the agency from Mr. Nobody are trying to help them out of the situation. And again, just the sequence is so fantastic. Letty chasing Dante in the streets of Rome was a great motorcycle scene. Bomb comes out of the back of the car, and watching Dom playing ping pong, he's hitting the bomb across the streets of Rome and it's on fire. I'm on the edge of my seat like, man, I was appreciating all of that, man. As ridiculous as it was, there's a lot of work that goes into these stunts, and I thought that was one of the best stunt sequences of the entire film, and like I said, one of my favorites in the franchise. So Dom isn't able to completely stop the bomb, but he stops it from hitting the Vatican. He throws it in the water and it explodes, and we see Dante, this is just the beginning of your suffering, Dom. So we see that sequence, but unfortunately, Dom and his free roaming self, the whole team, they got their pardons, but now they're America's most wanted. I should say not even America, but globally, they're wanted for this terrorist act as they're considered to be. So all the stuff they've done in the past 10 years have went under the water because Mr. Nobody isn't there to defend them. They are now criminals like they were to start from the beginning of this franchise. So this is where the film kind of sets up the pieces where, again, going back to Infinity War, our characters are now split up. Right. So they open the film with our characters together, but then they're ultimately split up due to Dante and his whole plans of everything going on. So we have Letty is captured by the police in Rome. We have Dom is solo dolo. He has a conversation with Deckard's mom. Helen Mirren's character name is Queenie, if I'm not mistaken. He has a conversation with her. We have, Rome and Han and Ramsey and Luda's character are now hidden underground. They somehow go to a container and they make their way to London. So that's where everyone is. And the way we're going to break it down from here on out, and actually before we actually talk about individual plot lines, we meet some new characters. We have number one, Tess, who's played by the incredible Brie Larson. Seems like a good person, and she seems like she likes to have fun. And she's having fun in this role as Tess, who's the daughter of Miss Nobody. She is meeting her new boss, Agent Ames, who's played by Alan Ritchson. I've seen him in previous things, but he is someone to keep an eye out for. I think like we're going to see more and more of him in the coming years because he's not, I wouldn't say has to be an actor, but I think that he's great at the things that he's played in so far. And I think he has range. He just hasn't been able to fully showcase it because I think right now he's being kind of typecasted, but essentially replacing the Hobbs of it all, which my boy makes his return. He's replacing him, but he is literally replacing Mr. Nobody. He's missing right now. He's disappeared off the map, as they say in this film a couple times. But he's a new boss, and he's not a fan of Dominic Toretto. So he tells Tess, don't interfere, don't get involved with this. They establish those characters, and we actually have a meeting between her and Dom where he convinces her in a very Dominic Toretto, another superpower of his, not only driving cars, but getting people to do things that they say no to initially, right? Because they don't want to lose their career, let alone lose their life, right? He gives her the Dominic Toretto speech about family and protecting your family and this, that, and the third, gives her the cross to go save Letty and to use the cross to let Letty know that she's working with Dom. She's going to break out Letty in this undisclosed hidden location. So now we're going to kind of pivot over to, okay, plot-wise, some work better than others, and some are just meant to set up things while others are moving this narrative forward. So in this, I'm going to call this section side plots, subplots, set up for the next movie section of this video. So section number one is what's going on with Letty and Cypher. They're paired up in this particular portion of the film. And as my kind of section of this video alludes to, this had nothing to do with the main plot. This is where my criticism of the movie kind of come in. There are two main plots, and this is one of them, that have nothing to do with what's going on in this narrative. It's just only setting up the next film. And this is a prime example. Letty and Cypher in Antarctica. We have Letty is met by Tess, who tells her she's going to help her out. She stabs her in the shoulder and she's taken to a medical bay. Now, it's never revealed what I'm assuming she put some type of nanobite, a location finder. She put something in her arm that is not revealed. We just see it get it stitched up. Then Letty wakes up. Cypher's there. Obviously, there's tension there. Ultimately, these two fight. We see them take out the guards. Letty wants to fight her. Now, when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, this is a cool action sequence. Two of the most badass action women in the industry kicking ass. I love it. It was an ass whooping that was well overdue for Cypher for what she did in part 8. I get why Letty wanted to fight her, but not in this moment. It's like, you guys gotta escape. You need to work together, which they do briefly, but then they ultimately fight, which I'm like, why are they fighting right now? It makes no sense besides, obviously, the vengeance of what Letty wanted to do for what she did in previous movies. But putting that aside, ultimately fight, and they make their way out of this facility. And we'll tie back to Letty and Cypher when we get to the last scene of this film. But Like I said, I like the action from the scene, but literally their plot had nothing to do with our main narrative of this film. It was only the sole purpose of this was to set up the next film. Let me know what you all thought of the Letty and Cypher plot in the comments below. Meanwhile, Tej, Roman, Ramsey, and Han are in London again. They got into these secret containers with cologne, and we have a cameo by Pete Davidson, who's like this hacker dude that Ramsey used to know back in her hacking days. They have this kind of fun moment where he's poking jokes, the muffins that we always see Han. That man is constantly eating something, some snacks. He's a snacker, right? He's getting high on the funny muffins. That stuff was kind of funny. Didn't really serve a purpose in the main narrative. This is my second example of a subplot that, yes, I enjoy these characters, but it literally did nothing to move this plot forward. It's just kind of extra stuff that's, again, setting up something that they fake a death. And we'll get to that death sequence later, but they're getting all that set up. Pete Davidson ultimately turns on them. He will ward on their head, but they escape. And Han comes up with the idea that he knows someone in London that can possibly help them, and that is no other than Deckard Shaw. He goes into his place. They have a bit of a scuffle. It's more so Deckard thinking that Han was coming there to kill him, which he wasn't. While they're kind of figuring that out, the agency from Pete Davidson calling those people in found them, and then we get an action sequence there. Ultimately, again, this scene was just setting up. Now, here's the question. We see Deckard Shaw finds out from Ramsey that everyone that's ever helped Dominic Toretto is now targeted by Dante. We're going to get to Dante here in a second. But he finds out his mom is being targeted. I don't know if his brother is, I'm assuming his brother's in the we're going to probably see, Owen Shaw coming back in the future, but he's now on this own separate mission to save his mom. Now, the question, and then of course, the rest of the crew is going to meet Dom at the rendezvous. Question is, Deckard Shaw's mission to save his mom, and potentially his brother, is that a Fast 11 plot, or is that a Hobbs and Shaw Part 2 type of mission? And we'll get to Hobbs of it all a little bit later. But because if we get into 11, and if all these people have to save their own individual stories and own individual family, that's a 3-hour film, right? So I'm leaning more towards maybe potentially this is a subplot that's created to set up the Hobbs and Shaw 2 sequel. But more chances than not, it's going to probably just set up the next film, right? But let me know, what do you all think that particular story of him saving his mom will end up seeing? Or maybe it's a mixture of two, right? Maybe we'll see some of it in the next one, and then some it carry over to Hobbs and Shaw 2. Let me know what you, and I'm going to come back to that when we circle to the future of this franchise towards the end of this video. But let's talk about that in the comments. Those are set up side plots that don't really have anything to do with the main plot. Now let's talk about the main plot, and this is the meat and potatoes of the film. This is the heart of the film, and this is the MVP of the film, and that's Dante and Dominic Toretto and their banter back and forth, but in particularly putting a spotlight on Jason Momoa as Dante Reyes. Man, easily the best character as far as in this film for me. And obviously, I don't say obviously, but he was the best villain in the entire franchise. Now, I got respect for Owen Shaw in the Fast 6. I thought that Luke Evans was fantastic in that role, very much a badass secret agent. I have nothing but love for Deckard Shaw. Jason Statham is born to be an action star. I really enjoyed him. But again, and in Cypher, I really, I'm not the biggest fan of 8. 8 is not that good of a movie. For me, it has its moments, Dom versus the family and all that stuff. And it's really a Hobbs movie, if we're being honest. But putting that aside, Cypher is a pretty menacing villain, and she killed Dom's baby mama, which at the end of the day, we see all those villains I just mentioned, who I like, they end up working with Dom later on. Dante ain't gonna be working with Dom, y'all. He will not. There is no way in hell he is getting invited to the barbecue, because he was so fantastic in this movie. He was not only menacing, he was threatening. He could handle his own. He was intelligent. He had his motives. He had his reasons of what he was doing. And again, going back to that Infinity War comparison, Thanos, terrible thing he was doing, but in his mind, he was doing the right thing. And comparing that to Dante, yes, he is a psychopath, as they established in this film from a very early age, but he's doing the same thing that Dominic Toretto would do, which is vengeance for his family. You killed his dad. He's now out for blood. So again, not saying I condone or behind Dante, but he has his reasons, and it's pretty compelling. And Dom would know that because you mess with his family. So I love what he brought to the role. I compared in my review, I said he's doing his own, Aquaman now turned the Joker meets Norman, played by Gary Oldman. If you guys have never seen Leon the Professional, fantastic film in the 90s with a young Natalie Portman, awesome film. But one of my favorite villains of all time is Norman in that movie. He was fantastic. And I'm seeing Jason Momoa given a Norman-esque type of performance, man. He was just electric. He was having so much fun in the role. You can tell. Pretty confident that he improv, like probably a lot of the stuff he was doing, like, hey, it's nice to meet you. I'm Dante, Shantae, like all that little, flamboyant moments. I think Jason Momoa added that flavor. And I've always been a fan of Jason Momoa since seeing him in, Game of Thrones, and obviously transition to other, kind of not the best films like Conan the Barbarian. And he's in another film with Stallone. He was the villain in that one. So I've been watching him for a while. So that's my man, Jason Momoa, Aquaman, baby. He was just electric in this movie, and the scene where he's talking to those dead guys, like, it's just, guys, is awesome. But neither here nor there. I got on a little side tangent. Shout out to Dante. Jason Momoa was fantastic. We have that going on with Dom. Actually, before we get into Dom, let me backtrack a bit, which is still focused on the main plot, and that is the little B of it all, because he's kind of not a MacGuffin, but it's kind of that rehashing of Fast 8 where we got to save the son. So Mia is looking over little B, but they're under attack by the agency, and this is where Jacob Toretto comes into the place. And I do want to take a moment to say shout out to John Cena, because his character was redeemed in this film, because I hated everything about Jacob Toretto and Fast 9. The worst part of that entire film. They redeemed him because they played into the sensibilities of what I think makes John Cena a good actor. He has charisma, man. He's the fun uncle in this film. He is doing his Peacemaker. He's doing a lot of that stuff from Peacemaker where he's kind of goofy, still menacing, can kill anyone in a drop of a hat. So I love that they played into what John Cena does in my eyes, which is he has a lot of on-screen good presence, good charisma, and he's partnered with the kid, Little B. And I will say the Little B John Cena scenes were very kiddish, very family friendly. Like, it wasn't, I was very surprised by that, and I enjoyed it. I'm not going to lie. I would put the John Cena Little B subplot over the Letty and Cypher and the Ted, all that stuff. I would put that over that plot for me personally, because I was having fun with it, because John Cena was having fun. They're on the airplane. We do get, as far as Paul Walker of it all, his daughter makes a cameo in this film. She is the flight stewardess, so the flight attendant that helps out Jacob take out the men on the plane. But the scene with the which, by the way, how do you get a miniature airplane within the airplane and pass through the flight security? I don't know how that happened. Maybe he had some clearance, or maybe he knew someone at the gate, like he knew the person in the air, the flight attendant. But Canoe was a pretty cool sequence, and their whole thing is getting to the rendezvous. But again, did a good job of setting up the cool uncle, because ultimately, as we'll discuss as we lead to the ending, Jacob dies in this film. I did not see that coming, man. John Cena, I guess, say, like, we got to swap out one wrestler. Thanks for keeping the franchise fun with your, charisma, John. But The Rock is now coming back. So we'll get to the death scene in a second. But I did enjoy the Little B and Jacob stuff, because they did redeem him in my eyes. Back to the Dom of it all. He's now in Rio. He meets up with Dante, and this is where we meet Isabel, who is revealed to be Elena's younger sister. And again, it's all about family. Everyone, this is Star Wars. Everyone has a brother and a sister and a father out there in this universe, but it all comes together because it's family. So they do a racing sequence, but as they're racing, he gives Don, again, he's 10 steps ahead of Dominic Toretto. He gives him the choice. You can save either Isabel or you can save Diogo, who was from Fast 5. So ultimately, Diego dies, and Dom is able to manage to hit the car of Isabel and take the bomb off and save her. But ultimately, Isabel gets taken by Dante. He takes Dom and her to the same bridge that his father died. And this is where, while all that's happening, Ames has caught up to Dom at this point. He captures him. Their car explodes. They're on the bridge. And ultimately, Tess comes up. He's, again, 10 steps ahead. He had all this planned out. He wanted Tess to come because she has the MacGuffin from Fast 7, which is created by Ramsey, the God's Eye. Now has that because he wanted to take it, because he wanted to find where Dominic Toretto's son was, to find where they were with that secret rendezvous. So he did all that. And meanwhile, Ames is now a good guy. He's a cop turned working for Dom at the moment. I'll talk about, they showed their hand a little bit too early in the film, but he's now working with Dom. And now this leads us into wrapping up the film. So now we're going to be breaking down the ending of Fast 10. So at this point in the movie, all of our teams scattered all over the place. We got people in London, we have people in Antarctica, and now we have Dom, with the help of Ames, going to go save his son, who is being chased down by Dante, who used Guide's Eye to find his location, who he's with Uncle Jacob in their secret rendezvous. So this is where we get the setup where Jacob has little B. He shows him his bat cave, essentially, or his peacemaker cave, and he has his Mad Max Fury Road car nephew uncle moment where he's using the missiles to take out the crew, but ultimately one of the missiles gets stuck, and Dante is now in the mix. Dom's now in the mix. We have AIM in the sky helping him out. We'll talk about the reveal here in a second. But as all that's happening, do not want to underplay or miss out on another cool highway action set piece, a la, Fast 7 with the tank and all that stuff, because they kind of do a very similar kind of playback of that scene, because we have two characters that are, or I should say maybe Fast 6 with a mixture of Fast 7, because little B ends up getting captured, getting taken by Dante when he was in the car. Meanwhile, we have Dom ultimately gets his son, because he goes back to the beginning of the film and says, when he talked to him about driving a car, filling out the car, knowing your lines, things of that nature, he tells that to his son over the intercom. He opens the door and they do the Fast 7 when Ramsey had to jump into the car when the God's Eye missile was coming on them. So they do a lot of kind of rehashing of those, great scenes. And it was still a great scene. Dom coming out of the airplane, crashing on two cars again. Part of your brain that says, that would not happen in real life. You got to cut that off, right? So while all of that's happened, it's a great action scene. It's just ridiculous, right? But we talked about that earlier in the breakdown. I appreciate what goes into making these movies and making some of these ridiculous but cool action scenes. While all that's happening, we have the final standoff. At this point, Dom has gotten his son, but they're still being chased by Dante's men. And this is where the ultimate sacrifice comes into play. One of the bigger characters in this film who was redeemed. I talked about it, that Jacob Toretto was the worst part of Fast 9, but he was redeemed in this one because they allowed John Cena to be John Cena, and that is a guy with charisma channeling his inner peacemaker role. He sacrifices himself. He says, thanks, Dom. I was in the dark for the longest, and now I'm in the light. He's changed his brother. He ultimately sacrificed. Now, he could have jumped out of that car. He could have did what he did, which was essentially flip his car over, use the missiles in his car to explode the rest of Dante's men. He could have jumped out. No, I'm sorry. He could have made it happen. I mean, I've seen Dom do some pretty ridiculous things and make his way out of situations. Jacob is a Toretto. He has that in his blood. He could have figured a way out. Hell, he might not be dead, but assuming he is dead, he is dead. He sacrificed himself. Obviously, Little B is upset because he obviously loved his uncle prior to this film, but really now seeing his uncle in action and having this kind of newfound love for his uncle. And again, I go back to which I talked about at the very beginning of this video, the whole idea of legacy, right? And him, Jacob's legacy, how he wanted to leave on this earth. So it was, again, ties all together. He dies. Meanwhile, Dom is being chased down by Dante, and he thinks that he's out of the clear, right? That Dante doesn't have any more to his disposal. Well, surprise, surprise. Dante has another ace in the hole, and that is the reveal that Agent Ames, who replaced Mr. Nobody, was working from him 10 years ago. We go back to the flashback at the beginning of the movie where I think they showed their hands to it because, of course, you say, Ellie, of course you know this now after seeing the movie. At the beginning of the movie, when we get the flashback of Fast 5 and showing us from a different perspective, you see a enormous gentleman in a blue suit with a blonde hair, and they don't ever show you his face. But of course, we know it's Ames working with, I'd say, the whole film. But I'm like, wait a minute. There's a reason why they're not showing us that guy's face. And also, like I said, this dude is as big as a house. The first time we see Ames, when he's talking to Tess in the facility, what is he wearing? A blue shirt. And of course, the blonde hair, I'm like, sold me. And of course, you can say I'm just saying this because I've seen the film. Now, no, I knew that Ames was going to be working for Dante. And plus, too, these films aren't Shakespeare. They're pretty predictable. when he was talking to Tess about the whole life of Dominic Toretto, how he's able to convert policemen, Hobbs, Brian, Mama, he's able to get these police on his side. Once he said that, I said, well, of course, he's not going to fall for that trope because he's already working for the bad guy. So neither here nor there. Let me know if you guys saw that twist coming. I saw it coming, but I'll play, like, oh, I caught by surprise. And as I talked about, the whole subplot with Luda and Rome and Ramsey and Han, they're making their way to London to the rendezvous. They're in this 757 plane to save the day. Nah. We have Ames with a big old missile. He shoots down the plane, and we see our characters in the plane. Oh no, a missile's coming. And the camera pans out of the airplane and it shows them crashing into a mountain. I'm gonna tell y'all something right now. There's no way. And now again, for the effect of being shocked, they want the audience, and I'm pretty sure people in my theater were like, oh no, they're dead. Let me tell y'all something. They are not dead. Come Fast 11, probably the beginning of the movie, we're going to see that how many times have these characters flown out of an airplane via a car? It's going to be revealed. They are safe and fine. Hey, maybe one of them might die because there are too many of the same characters. Maybe Ramsey or maybe even Luda, maybe Rome, because his whole thing was trying to be a leader. We might see him when they're crashing down. He gives them the last parachute and he sacrificed himself. Who knows? But I'm pretty confident in saying that none of them are dead. The only people that might have died is the pilots, but they're going to be okay. But again, going back to the Infinity War isms in this movie, the snapping, half of the Avengers, half of the world, half of the planet, half of the universe being blipped. They'll be back, ladies and gentlemen. Trust me on that, on top of every other character in this franchise. But putting that aside and playing into they're dead, we are now, everything's crumbling. Again, the whole thing for Dante was, I'm going to make you suffer, and two, I am ready for you to die. Very a la Bane. One of the coolest scenes, two Optimus Prime trucks crash into each other, and Dom goes down the damn explosion. He looks at him. It is now time for you to die. Again, very much like Bane, but he presses the missile, and he has all these explosives across the dam, and you're to assume that the water's going to come down and drown them out. No, because they're going to be saved by Luda and Rome and all of them. But again, a cliffhanger. We're left to think that they might die. ... So now that brings us to the last scene of the movie, and that brings us back to what's going on with Letty Cypher. They break out of the jail. They got their coats on, and she's like, I told you I had a good plan. You should follow through with me, right? In comes the submarine that Cypher hacked in Fast, The Fate of the Furious, and pops out of the submarine. It's been rumored for a while that Gal Gadot was going to return, because I come from the old school of, if I don't see a body, ain't nobody dead. And ladies and gentlemen, unless she has a twin sister, because it's all about family, but assuming this is Giselle, she's back. And going back to my question I had earlier about what did Tess put in her arm and her shoulder when she stabbed her, whether it's a tracking device, whether it's something of that nature, regardless of the point is, I would imagine that Tess and Cypher and Giselle are all working together. I don't know how, again, we know this franchise likes to make the villains good guys eventually. I don't know what happened between Fast 9. Well, of course, we know that Mr. Nobody and their agency, they recruit criminals, right? We know that from Fast 7, right? Yeah, recruited Dom and recruited in 8, he recruited Deckard. So they like to work with people that get the job done. So question is, does Tess and Cypher and Giselle, have they been working together? And then the Giselle of it all, where have you been, Wonder Woman? How, again, nobody's dead, but I mean, come on. They were going 200 miles per hour on that runway on the plane, and she went back, maybe she landed on the car like Dom did with Letty in Fast 6. Who knows? But she's here now. Again, Han died. He's back, and then now, Letty died. She's back. And go ahead and add Giselle to that batch. That is the last scene in the movie. I thought that cliffhanger number one with Dom and his son was a little, it cut too quick. It should have been more anticipation to it. And this might not be true, but I should have saved it before I can show you guys. There was an article online that someone claimed that had seen a test screening of this film a couple months ago. And when they saw the film, The last scene was of Dom and his son Little B, and the whole cliffhanger was like that was the last scene in the film. And the post-credit scene, which I'm going to break down here in a second, was the Giselle is still alive in the submarine. Take that with a grain of salt, but that would have been a better cliffhanger-ish, because at least we see them in peril, we see them, the water came out. So versus like them looking back, like, is he gonna press the button or whatnot? I would have liked it if he pressed the button and we're left to them, the water then coming down, and then it cuts to the last scene. So let me know what you guys thought about the cliffhanger. And then the Giselle of it all, as we talked about, who's working with who, how does she survive, and what next with those characters? Let me know your thoughts on that. So we are in a renaissance of cliffhangers. Infinity War ends Endgame 1 year later. Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2, 2 years later. Mission Impossible 7 into 8, Part 1 of Part 2, Across the Spider-Verse, Beyond the Spider-Verse. What's going on in Hollywood? Where are all these Part 1s coming from? But either way, Part 2 of this film is coming out. It's slated for 2025, but of course we know there's a WGA strike right now, so that might even be pushed back further, which brings me into, before we get into the post-credit scene, I know they had to issue with Justin Lin. I think the plan was to shoot Fast 10 and 11 back-to-back, but the gap between Part 10 and 11 is 2 years. Let's put a pin in that, because I'm going to talk about the future of this franchise. Let me just get to, let's break down the post-credit scene. Unfortunately, is spoiled the day of the premiere. The Wrap put out the spoiler, the scoop, as they called it, that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, they didn't, I didn't read the article. I just saw the headline. And I'm like, God damn it. I figured that he was going to come back inevitably. The whole Vin Diesel versus The Rock, like outside of acting, they had beef and this, that. Like, I'm like, first off, The Rock comes from wrestling. This is a wrestling move that I've seen 1,000 times. The heel versus the hero, got beef, setting up for WrestleMania. So like that, and who knows if there was any validity to the whole them having beef off screen. There might be some truth in that, but I figured it was all a setup to gear for him to inevitably come back to the franchise. Now, of course, I know the other spin of it all is The Rock's name might not be looking the best after Black Adam, which sure, whatever. It was a huge L, but it's like, this is The Rock. This guy is one of the biggest movie stars in Hollywood. He's gonna be fine. So I don't think he's running back on Vin Diesel's door saying, Vin, come on, man, let me back in the family. I doubt that happened. I think this was set up for a while. This kind of built that anticipation. But let's talk about the scene. So the scene is, this is the last post-credit scene in the film. We have this kind of black ops team on a mission. Everyone's in masks. They're in this building, let's just say a building. And we have a phone, and there's a video playing. And the phone is picked up by a mysterious person at the moment. And he or she, let's say, we know who it is in a minute. They answer the phone, and it's Dante. Now, my question is, when does this scene take place? Are we assuming that Dante is calling him as he's pressing the button on Dom? Or is the whole thing in Fast 11, he presses it, they're drowning, he assumes they're dead, and now he's moving on to his next, which is reveal, as he's saying on the phone, Dom was the one that hit the vehicle, that hit my dad with a car. He didn't do the final blow. As they cut back one more time, there's so many cutbacks and flashbacks in this movie. We cut back to the scene on the bridge when we see Dante's father dies, and we know from Fast 5, one of the best in the franchise, it was Hobbs that shot him. So I love that they kind of, again, this is what makes me think that this was planned out, that this was thought of. This wasn't like, again, a fourth quarter, The Rock knocking on the door saying, let me back in. I think this was planned out. Some might disagree with me, especially if you know some of the rumors of the test screening in the post-credit scene, that this might have been shot more recently than we would imagine, but let's speculate about that in the comments. But in the scene, Thompson shot his dad, and he says, I'm coming for you next. And he took off his mask, and he has like a gray beard. He's been through it all. So he does his, classic, I'm going to get you, you some bitch. I'm going to hunt you down. Listen, man, regardless of what you feel about The Rock, that's my guy. I grew up a wrestling fan. He's my favorite wrestler, best entertainer of all time when it comes to wrestling, in my opinion. Love that man. Love him as an action star. Love him as the character Hobbs. So I knew inevitably he was coming back, and I knew the spoiler, but it still played well, right? I love the scene. I love that he's back. But then this goes back to my question, talked about with Deckard Shaw, when he knew that his mom was under attack. Is this Hobbs saving his daughter, saving his family, going to be Fast 11 plot, or will it be Hobbs and Shaw 2 plot? Let me know. It could be a mixture of the both. But one would assume it's going to be a plot that is going to be carried on to Fast 11, which That's my thoughts on the films, breaking it all down, post credits, ending. Let's pivot over and let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed in this post credit scene as well as the ending. But let's pivot over to another discussion, and that is what next with this franchise. We all know this is a part one of a part two of a potentially part three. Vin Diesel, red carpet last week at the premiere. Studio came to him. We love part one. We're excited for part two. Vinny, please give us a part three. We'll see. We'll see. Box office will dictate if we get a part three of this finale, and then it'll be a part four and a five. We'll see. But assuming that we're just talking about the next film. So as it lays right now, 2025 is the release date. Might be pending WGA writing. Here's my thing as far as it would have been, again, putting aside that they didn't shoot 10 and 11 back to back, the vacancy in 2024. There is again, I mentioned Infinity War and Endgame, 1 year layover. Across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider, or Beyond the Spider-Verse, 1 year over. Mission Impossible 7, Dead Reckoning, into, Dead Reckoning. I don't know what the subtitle is for part two, but it's 1 year after. It's a 2-year gap between part 10 and part 11. There should be, I'm not saying you do have to, because Dune came out in 2021 and part two's come out in 2023, 2 years later. You can make it happen. It's not impossible to get a part two 2 years later, but I feel like they should squeeze something into next year. Obviously, it's impossible. Well, I don't say impossible, but with the WGA strike, it's going to be hard to make a movie, shoot a movie right now. And this is just the fan in me, and this is just, it would have been the business decision. I know Rock had a million things to do, but Hobbs and Shaw was pretty successful. If I was The Rock, I know he's making a movie as like Santa Claus. I know he made Black Adam. I know he's probably got 19 million different projects he's doing, working on Netflix, Red Notice Part 2. Why wasn't Hobbs and Shaw 2 a top priority? This movie almost damn near made $800 million. It made more than like Fast 6 and I think Fast 7, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not Fast 7, because I think that made $1 billion. But I think it made more than Fast 6. Either way, it was very profitable, right? It was very profitable for the studio and profitable for The Rock and Jason Statham. Why wasn't the sequel like top priority? Because to me, again, hindsight's 2020, you have part one of Fast 10 come out, Hobbs and Shaw 2, which could have played into Deckard saving his mom, Hobbs saving his daughter. They need both of them to help save their families and then tie that into Fast 11. That would have been a great kind of, I don't want to say filler because it's its own movie, but it ties all together to this universe they created. So again, I don't think anything's been announced that there's going to be anything Fast related come 2024. And then, of course, we know we're going to have 2025. Well, assuming that everything will work out with the writer's strike, 2025, it will come out probably around the same time, May or the summer of that year. So that is the Hobbs and Shaw of it all. Let me know what you all think about that. But as far as Fast 11, it's safe to assume that the cliffhanger, Dom, Little B, will probably be saved by the dead crew coming in to save them. And then we're going to see the team very a la Infinity War, Endgame, all come together. I'm talking Brian coming back. Giselle's now back. Hobbs is back. Just from previous Fast films. Sean from Tokyo Drift, who appeared in Fast 9. Like all the characters that are alive or dead will be coming together to take on Dante, Ames, and I'm pretty confident that there is another big bad out there, and more so from the spinoff of Hobbs and Shaw, that there was a bigger bad, that Idris Elba had someone that he was below, which I've always thought was going to be like Keanu Reeves. David Lynch being the director of that film, and also David Lynch having a good relationship with Keanu Reeves. So I always imagine that the big bad doing all the cyber stuff, someone that, Cypher worked for, Dante knows about, Ames knows about, and he's like been controlling all this stuff the whole time. The real big Thanos of it all is like a Keanu. I'm saying Keanu Reeves, that's who I want to be the villain, but I think there will be another bigger villain that's going to be set up for Hobbs and Shaw 2 and Fast 11 into potentially now sounds like Fast 12. So that's what I'm thinking. And we already lost Jacob. We think we lost the other crew, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, Dominic Toretto is going to end up dying. We're going to probably see that. If they do make a 12, not an 11, probably a 12, but if 11 is the last one, Dom will probably die. But quarter mile at a time, y'all. This was so much fun. Thank you for listening to me for however long this video ends up being after the final edit. But overall, again, I personally enjoyed Fast 10. It was a huge improvement for Fast 9. Again, I'm going to have a video ranking the individual films, but let's just give you a preview here. It falls in line with me with like Fast 7 and 6, kind of in that range. And again, I'll have a short video going over my ranking, so keep an eye out for that. So with that being said, thank you all for watching today's spoiler review, breakdown, Anything Explained, post credits, my tangents, my rants, all that stuff that we talked about. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed yourself like I did, consider hitting the like button, sharing today's video, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel where we do other spoiler discussions, live streams, we do movie reviews very daily, we do short form content, long form content, after shows, and all that fun stuff. So consider subscribing to the channel. You all have been awesome. Make sure that if you are driving a car, you're not driving crazy like these characters, and you all be safe out there. I appreciate you. As you can see on the screen now, come and join the community. Check out my non-spoiler review for this film. Check out my other reviews for this year thus far, and we'll catch you all on the next video.